So welcome once again to the question paper analysis of UGC NET English, December 2021, Shift 1. And this analysis is presented by Professor Academy, Chennai. And today we are going to discuss questions from 26 to 30. Let's go to 26. Arrange the following essays in the chronological order of publication. So we have 4 essays here. A. T.S. Eliot, The Function of Criticism. B. Edgar Allan Poe, The Philosophy of Composition. C. Henry James, The Art of Fiction. D. Virginia Woolf, Modern Fiction. Then we have the options. Option A. So this is the arrangement. B, C, A, D. So in the sense, we have Philosophy of Composition, The Art of Fiction, then Function of Criticism, and D, The Art of Fiction. Modern fiction. So similar way we have option B. So you have B, C, D, A. Then option C, C, B, A, D. Then we have option D, C, B, D, A. So what you have to do, you have 4 essays. What is odd or what is so different among these options? So just take a minute and just guess. We have authors. There's something to do with criticism, fine. But if you look at it, we have T.S. Eliot, Henry James, Virginia Woolf, and someone odd. These are all modern writers, but Edgar Allan Poe stands different. So if you come to this kind of an analysis, so before you go for the choice, why don't you look at this analysis? So you have all modernist novelists and poet. So you have Virginia Woolf, Henry James, and T.S. Eliot. But Edgar Allan Poe stands different. And then if you arrive at this kind of an analysis, then you can go for the options. So we know Edgar Allan Poe came first historically, right? The American poet and short story writer. Then he might have wrote that essay first, The Philosophy of Composition. And now you can eliminate 2 options. So you can eliminate option C and option D because both begin with C. That means Henry James, The Art of Fiction. Then now you are left with the 2, either A or B. And another commonality, so we can come to the conclusions, okay, Edgar Allan Poe, Philosophy of Composition comes first. Then C, The Art of Fiction. So that is a commonality we have in option A and option B. Then we are left with 2. I mean, after B and C, whether it is A or D. A, Function of Criticism, D, Modern Fiction. So we have to make a choice. Then let's go to the answer. Then you make a choice. So answer is B. So this is the order. First comes Edgar Allan Poe's Philosophy of Composition. Then The Art of Fiction by Henry James. Then we have Virginia Woolf's Modern Fiction. Then T.S. Eliot's The Function of Criticism. At least, we went for 50-50, right? So when you go for this, you spend a minute or 2 or a few seconds, you can eliminate 2 options easily. Then you have a 50-50 chance. Then go with instinct, or if you have some previous knowledge, then you can go for the exact answer. Now let's go for the analysis. So chronological question, they are always tough. We can't remember, but at least you have a sense. Okay, this writer belonged to this age or this country, or if you know some idea about who came first. Of course, Edgar Allan Poe came first. So that's how we eliminated 2 options. So Edgar Allan Poe, The Philosophy of Composition, published in 1846. Then Henry James, The Art of Fiction. So among the modernist writers, so he was a senior, 1884. It was published in 1884. Then we have Virginia Woolf's Modern Fiction, 1919. Then T.S. Eliot's The Function of Criticism, 1923. So before we go to the next question, let's see the gist of each and every essay. Okay. So let's start with Edgar Allan Poe's The Philosophy of Composition. So what was the context? Edgar Allan Poe published his masterpiece, the poem, The Raven, in 1845. It was met with harsh criticism. So he wrote a defense. So this is the defense. the philosophy of composition. So in this essay, he explained the logic behind the composition of the poem Raven. And through this essay, we also get some of his philosophy of writing itself. So that's the title itself, right? So one of the famous statements made by Edgar Allan Poe is this, when it comes to writing. So if someone is going to write a piece of work, especially a short story or a poem, what one should do, or what a writer should do, a writer should always remember the end in mind. So if you have the end in mind, how you are going to end a particular work, then you can begin with a perfect opening, then you can take it forward, a perfect middle, then you achieve that end, right? So that's his famous statement. It is only with the denouement, D-E-N-O-U-E-M-E-N-T. It's a French word meaning the unraveling of the plot, kind of an ending, constantly in view, that we can give a plot its indispensable air of consequence or causation. So if you're going to write something, we should know how to end that work. So if you know how to end that work, naturally you will know how to begin it and how to go forward. And when it comes to short stories or any work for that matter, he said, as regards the length of a work, a literary work, the limit of a single sitting, a work, especially a short story, should be read in a single sitting. So if you go beyond that, the readers may lose their interest, or there will be distractions. So that's how Edgar Allan Poe wrote only one novel. He didn't write a lot of novels because of this philosophy. So with this, let's go to the next essay. So we have The Art of Fiction by Virginia Woolf, published in 1884. Henry James. So it comes again. Sorry, Henry James. So Henry James, The Art of Fiction, 1884. This is a reply to the lecturer, Professor Walter Besant's lecture, Fiction as One of the Fine Arts. So this was the name of the lecture delivered by Walter Besant. So in this lecture, he claimed that we should come up with some laws of fiction. There should be some laws on how to write a fiction. So this was his statement. Laws of fiction may be laid down and taught with as much precision and exactness. Now, after listening to this lecture or heard about this lecture, Henry James wrote this reply, The Art of Fiction. So can there be laws? Can you say this is how one should write? So if there are laws, and we don't think a new writing can come, right? So this is how he goes against Walter Besant. Henry James says, the characters, the situation which strike one as real will be those that touch and interest one most. So for one reader, some character is very close to their heart. For other readers, it may not be. For them, it is cruel or something different. They may not sound real. Example for that matter. So when we think of this Spanish novelist Cervantes and his famous character Don Quixote or Don Quixote, so this character might interest some readers. They might like Don Quixote and his companion Sancho Panza, and they're traveling around the world. But it may not interest others. Similar way, we have Mr. Macabre, Dickens' character in David Copperfield. So some might like this character. So we don't know whether Don Quixote is real or this is more real. Dickens' characters are more real or Cervantes' characters are more real. So it's up to the reader. We can't say this is the law, you should follow this. So that kind of a thing we can't do. So that's how. That's why Henry James says the measure of reality is very difficult to fix. Right. So we can't say this is how one should write fiction. So this is The Art of Fiction by Henry James. Now let's go to Modern Fiction, published in 1919 by Virginia Woolf. This essay is closely related to her another famous essay, Mr. Bennet and Mrs. Brown. In both these essays, she attacks these three writers, particularly H.G. Wells, Arnold Bennett, and Galsworthy. So in this essay, Modern Fiction, she calls these writers materialist. Why? They focus only on the outer reality in their works. Whereas we have a modernist writer like James Joyce, whom Virginia Woolf calls spiritualist, one who looks within the mind of the character and tries to capture the inner reality of the characters. Right? So this is how she makes a difference. On the one side, we have H.G. Wells, Arnold Bennett, and Galsworthy, materialists. On the other side, particularly James Joyce, spiritualist, but also other modernists. So you have to compare this essay with Mr. Bennett and Mrs. Brown. In that essay, again, she goes for this kind of a classification, and she calls H.G. Wells, Arnold Bennett, and Galsworthy, Edwardians. On the other hand, we have Georgians. Modernist, we have James Joyce, T.S. Eliot, D.H. Lawrence, and others. So compare and contrast both these essays. Why this essay is important? Here she talks about the essence of modernist fiction or modern fiction. So what they do, or what these writers do, modernists, they examine for a moment an ordinary mind on an ordinary day. That's all. For example, you have James Joyce, Ulysses. This novel is about two people wandering the streets of Dublin, Ireland, and what goes through in their mind. And also we have the last section is dedicated to the major character's wife, Molly Bloom, right? So what we do, we try to capture the thoughts that go through that flows in one's mind, or we try to capture the flow of thoughts in one's mind, an ordinary mind on an ordinary day. So this is the focus of modernist writers. So the mind receives a myriad impressions. So even now, while you are listening to me, a lot of thoughts, oh, this is how they ask questions in NET exam, or will I pass in next NET exam, or should I listen to this lecture now? There are a lot of thoughts, trivial, fantastic, evanescent, or engraved with the sharpness of steel. So it's a very famous statement. Sometimes this could be a question. Which modernist writer made this statement? Examine for a moment an ordinary mind on an ordinary day. And the following lines, from all sides they come, they represents the thoughts or impressions, an incessant shower of innumerable atoms as if it's raining down. And as they fall, as they shape themselves into the life of Monday or Tuesday. So they take their own shape. The writer should just allow themselves to capture that thoughts. Okay. So this is the essence of modern fiction by Virginia Woolf. Now let's go to the next one, but that itself as a question. Question number 27. In The Function of Criticism, T.S. Eliot attacked J. Middleton Murry and similar critics for being devotees of what he called: option A, the inner voice; B, the muse's mystery; C, the romantic impulse; D, the symbol hunt. So if you think, there is some connectivity or some relationship between the earlier question and this question. Of course, the earlier question, this essay was mentioned. Again, now this question is particularly from this essay, T.S. Eliot's The Function of Criticism. And today, what I have done, I have taken questions, 5 questions, all are from modern fiction or modern literature, especially in Britain. So this time we got around 7 or 8 questions from modern literature. So you can focus on T.S. Eliot, Virginia Woolf, James Joyce, Henry James, D.H. Lawrence, and others. Okay, let's go to the answer. I hope you might have chosen some answer. So answer A, the inner voice. So in this essay, The Function of Criticism, T.S. Eliot attacked Middleton Murry. Why? Because as you know, this essay was written in 1923. T.S. Eliot was known for his classicist approach. This is how he described himself: classical in literature, royalist in politics, and Anglo-Catholic in religion. So you can also recall his another famous essay, Tradition and the Individual Talent. He is more a traditionalist and a classicist. What do you mean by that? So it's not just what you think. So when it comes to criticism, or writing, it's not just what your impression, personal impression. You have to follow the tradition. So you have to have certain things. It's not just going with this romantic impulse or inner voice, what you hear. So that's not criticism, right? So when we read this essay, this is a statement from where we got the question. But it was worth my while to follow Mr. Middleton Murry's comparison of outside authority with the inner voice. So this is where we got the question. So what we have to do, so we have to when we read these essays, when we think of T.S. Eliot, we should read the function of criticism, or tradition and the individual talent, or other of his famous essays. And when we read, we have to look for, if you look at it, we have this kind of capital letters, I inner and V in voice, or capital, it's in capital. So there is some stress on this phrase. So when they set question, they focus on this kind of a thing. That's how we analyze this question. So when we read this essay, maybe we can mark this line or get the essence of the entire essay so that we can eliminate options. Okay. So simply put, here we have a classicist who goes against a romanticist like Murray, who focuses on the inner voice, where here who goes with the tradition and also a critical one. Okay, a critical voice. So with this, we'll go to the next one. 28. Virginia Woolf's Orlando, the novel, opens in 1588, and Orlando, a 16-year-old boy, writes a poem called option A, the evergreen tree, B, the magic tree, C, the oak tree, D, the poison tree. If you have some idea about poem, the poison tree is a famous poem, but it doesn't appear in this work. You can easily eliminate that one, the poison tree. And we are left with three options. You can choose one. And when we think of Orlando, throughout this novel, this tree is mentioned, or this comes as a kind of a predominant symbol. And answer C, the oak tree. So as I told you before, you got this time we got question from modernist writers, their novels, their essays, or their philosophy. So next time we should also spend some time on modernist or modern literature. Okay. So let's look at this concept called leitmotif, Leitmotif. It's a critical term which means a recurrent element within a single work. Simply put, within a single work, there are predominant images or symbols, right? Or a kind of a thing that comes again and again in that single work, not across works, in a particular work. For instance, we have W.B. Yeats' poem, Sailing to Byzantium. So in this poem, we get this symbol, gyre, G-Y-R-E. It's a kind of a two conical, things intertwined, representing one kind of a spiral, a cone-like spiral. One spiral represents this material world, and another spiral, which is also intertwined with the other, represents a spiritual world. So here is a person who is caught between the material world and the spiritual world. And this is a predominant symbol in W.B. Yeats' works, especially this work, Sailing to Byzantium. This is called leitmotif. Then when we think of D.H. Lawrence, because he's also a modernist, in his famous work, Women in Love, we have this element coming again and again, star or star equilibrium. Because this novel talks about a relationship between a pair of lovers, right? And what is the star equilibrium? A pair or a partner, partners, what they should do, they should act like stars, or they should function like stars or like magnets. They should attract each other. They should also repulse each other. A star hangs in the sky steadily because it attracts other stars towards it, and also it repulses other stars. So there is a kind of a balance. Simply put, you should acknowledge the other's space, your partner's space. At the same time, you share your space with her or him. So it's a kind of attraction and repulsion. So this is that theory or that meaning, star equilibrium, which we found in D.H. Lawrence, Women in Love. Then we have this most famous description of fog. The novel by Charles Dickens, Bleak House begins with a detailed description of fog, a fog which you can't see through, anything at all. And finally, the fog leads to a court, a high court. So simply put, fog, you can't see through things, right? It obscures your vision or things in front of you. Similar way, when it comes to law, we can't see through law. There are a lot of rules, and we get lost in a fog. In also in a similar way, we get lost in a court system. So that's how even the title is symbolic. Bleak House. It refers to a court or law in general. Then we come to Virginia Woolf's Orlando. This work is about Orlando, who is both a male and a female, a boy and a girl, one who can experience both, like Tiresias, a Greek character. So Orlando throughout this work wants to write something, write a poem on the oak tree. So that is the symbol that comes again and again and again. And towards the end of this novel, the poem is completed. So that's how it ends. Okay. And when we think of this novel, you can also think of To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf, where we have another character who is also known for trying to complete a painting, right? So we have a character called Lily Brescoe in To the Lighthouse. And towards the end of the novel, To the Lighthouse, Lily Brescoe completes her painting. So when we, this is a commonality we find between these two novels, Virginia Woolf's Orlando and To the Lighthouse. So kind of someone creating a piece, or creating or completing the art, or understanding oneself. All right. So and is the birth of the artist. So there we have Lily Brescoe. Here we have Orlando, right? And Orlando, as I told you before, it's a kind of both male and female gender, right? And this novel is also based on Virginia Woolf's friend, Vita Sackville West, a kind of Virginia Woolf's partner, Vita Sackville West. And this novel, we have this concept called androgyny, ANDROGYNY. So androgyny, both male and female. Andro, male, gyny, female. So she wants to, a novelist or any writer, should represent both gender on equal measure. So this novel attempts to do that. Okay. So you can, maybe you can get a question like, which novelist is known for her concept called androgyny? So you can go for Virginia Woolf. Let's go to the next question. 29. Who is the author of the essay Lear, Tolstoy, and the Fool? Option A, Aldous Huxley. B, George Orwell. C, Somerset Maugham. D, Virginia Woolf. So again, question from modern literature. So let's go to the answer. Then let's see. So answer, George Orwell. So this is how they ask question. So what I'm saying, there is a trick when you prepare for NET exam. Whenever you read about a novelist, make sure that whether they have written a poem, poems or plays or essays. See, this is the trick. So when we think of George Orwell, we think of mostly his novels, whether it's the Burmese Days or Animal Farm or 1984. But it's the other way around. Now they have asked question from his essays. So this is how they ask. So when we think of a novelist, we also we have to think, okay, whether George Orwell had written anything else, essays or poems or short stories, something else. Similar way, Virginia Woolf also has written a lot of short stories. Even Somerset Maugham, everybody has also done something else. So we have to focus on that. So this is how they ask questions. So what you can do, so take this as an exercise. These are some of the famous essays by George Orwell. Shooting an Elephant, 1936. It's a very famous essay describing British imperialism, all right, the fall of British imperialism. Then we have Inside the Whale, 1940. So when you read this essay, Inside the Whale, make sure you also read Salman Rushdie's another is, Salman Rushdie's reply to this essay, later time, Outside the Veil. There's an essay called Outside the Veil by Salman Rushdie, in which he writes back to Orwell. Then we have another essay by Orwell, Mark Twain, The Licensed Jester, 1943. Then we have, this is often prescribed, The Sporting Spirit, 1945. Then Books versus Cigarettes, 1946. And when we think of George Orwell and writing, this is often prescribed. Politics and the English Language, 1946. Then I like this, I like the last one, Why I Write, 1946. Right, what you have to do, at least read a few. You should definitely read Shooting an Essay and Inside the Veil, and also The Sporting Spirit and Politics and the English Language. We'll go to the final question of today's class. Question number 30. In Politics and the English Language. So we got a question from this essay. See, look, we got two questions from George Orwell. Both are essays. So that's what I told you. Whenever you read, also look for other genres authors have attempted. Okay, in Politics and the English Language, which two of the following tricks are mentioned by George Orwell as bad habits of English use? So you have four. We have capital A, obsolete words, obsolete kind of old archaic words. Then B, pretentious diction, choice of words bombastic. Then C, dying metaphors. D, false modifiers. Now let's go to the options. Option A and B only. So in the sense, obsolete words and pretentious diction. Option B and C only. Option C, B and D only. Option D, C and D only. So you have to choose something. Then let's discuss this essay today. Okay, let's go to the answer. Answer option B and C only. Pretentious diction and dying metaphors. So if only we had read this previously, then it would have been easy one. But anyway, let's discuss now. Politics and the English Language was written in 1946. So in which he talks about some of the tricks used by writers, prose writers, dirty tricks. They don't want to work harder. So instead, they use these tricks to dodge their responsibility, to avoid their responsibility. So number one, dying metaphors. Instead of coming with something new, instead of coming with or coining new phrases or expressions, they always use worn out metaphors. Since we are so used to these metaphors lack evocative power. It doesn't evoke anything in you. So why people go for this trick? Merely used for saving the trouble of inventing phrases. Example, we always go for this cliches. Simply put, dying metaphors are cliches, overused expressions. Stand shoulder to shoulder with, no axe to grind, fishing in troubled waters, Achilles heel. Or you say, come up with flying colors. These are the expression we have heard again and again and again. It doesn't evoke anything in us. We lost interest in these metaphors. So if you are going to be a writer, or any writer for that matter, so you should avoid this trick. Don't go for dying metaphors. Come up with some new innovative expressions. That's actually redundant. Innovative expressions. Next, this is another trick. Operators are verbal false limbs. What is this? So operator in the sense, instead of going for the appropriate verbs or nouns, we go for something else. We try to confuse the readers. For instance, we can go for a simple verb like break. Right? Something is broken or something is useless now. Instead of that, we say something is rendered inoperative. What? So we want to sound kind of a sophisticated, but we sound sophisticated, but readers are not interested. Render inoperative. Instead of that, that's inappropriate here. We can go for a simple verb. Similar way, instead of going for passive voice, we can go for the active voice. For instance, I was asked by them to leave the place. It is speaking in a roundabout manner. The impact is not good. They asked me to leave the place. There is an impact direct, but it matters. Sometimes we can go for passive voice. And next, instead of going for gerund, verb plus ing, we go for noun construction. Look at this noun construction: by examination of. Instead of this, we can simply say by examining, right? So these are some of the tricks used by writers to avoid precision in writing. Then the third trick. So this is what we got in the question, right? Pretentious diction. When you pretend, we know a lot of things. We are aware of so many words, new phrases. Not necessarily we should use those words. Depends on the context. So why do we go for this kind of a choice of words? Pretentious, bombastic. Why? To dress up a simple statement. So you can simply say this is the meaning. So instead of that, they use a lot of critical terms, or they suddenly name drop Derrida or something. Why? Because they want to dress up a simple statement. So if you drop the name Derrida, then we are afraid, oh my God, a deconstructionist, post-structuralist. No. So don't do that. Put it in a simple word. For instance, because of this usage, what happened? An increase in slovenliness and vagueness. People don't understand your writing. For instance, instead of going for the English expression dead end, very simple word, dead end, you can understand. The end, the street ends there. There is it doesn't go. There's a kind of a wall at the end. Instead of that, we go for this a French expression, a foreign expression, cul-de-sac. For that you have to, if you're aware, okay, fine, or else you have to check it out. What is this cul-de-sac? So this is pompous. It's a show off. We are just showing off our knowledge. Then the last one, meaningless words. Sometimes we don't take pain, to get the right word. We go for, already existing meaningless words. There is no meaning at all. People use it, so we also use it. Why? Because not point to any discoverable object. They don't point to anything solid. It is just there. For instance, in art criticism, whenever we say it is a romantic poem, it is a sentimental poem, it's a natural poem, it's the empty word. It doesn't have, or these words, they do not refer to anything solid. Okay, so we have to avoid all these things. And finally, in the end of the essay, Orwell says you can follow these rules. So if you want to be a good writer, number one, never use a metaphor, simile, or other figure of speech which you are used to seeing in print. So you read a lot of metaphors and simile in newspapers and other things. You don't use that because people are already aware of that, and they are fed up with these metaphors and similes. So when you write, you have to come up with something solid, something new. Go for a new comparison from your life, from your experience. Then, number two, never use a long word where a short one will do. So if there is a short verb, go for it. Don't go for a long one. Three, if it is possible to cut a word out, always cut it out. So in other words, you have to edit your work. Sometimes just people write and send it to editors or send it to publication. That's ridiculous. Once you finish your writing, you should always go for editing. Take around 24 hours. Give it time. Then you go back and reread. Then you'll find out mistakes. Right? So earlier, if you just go for editing immediately, your eyes are already tired. Your mind is already tired. You can't find out mistakes. Give some time and go back. And when you go back, you can strike out certain words. You can cut it out certain words. This is useless here. So do that. Fourth, never use the passive where we can go for the active voice. Then fifth, never use a foreign phrase, a scientific word, or a jargon word if you can think of an everyday English equivalent, which we saw that. And the last one is interesting. Orwell says, break any of these rules sooner than say anything outright barbarous. So don't be a slave to all these rules. So if you think one of these rules doesn't work in a particular situation, just go against it. Okay. And let me end this class with this beautiful book. Most of the writers, they talk about this book. I also read this. Is a very short book, but an interesting one. The Elements of Style by William Strunk Jr. Then it was edited and revised by E.B. White. So simply put, William Strunk Jr. and E.B. White's The Elements of Style. A very short book, but it gives simple rules, how to avoid, certain expressions, or how to make your writing interesting. So this is one of the rule I like the most from this book. Write with nouns and verbs, not adjectives and adverbs. A beautiful statement simply means go for content words, words that have some meaning to convey, instead of decorations or exaggerations like adjectives and adverbs. Okay, with this, let's finish today's class. See you tomorrow with another 5 questions. And you can subscribe to this channel for further updates and further our upcoming videos. Thank you so much. All the best for your preparation.